Good evening and welcome. My name is Shelley Berard. I'm the president of Middleborough CPAC, and I'd like to thank all the panelists and Sean Siciliano for being here tonight. We sent out a survey asking families if you could ask a mental health professional one question, what would it be? We took those responses and created a slideshow and an expert panel to answer the concerns that our community members have. Tonight, we have Josh, who is a licensed independent clinician and social worker. We have Kevin, who is a licensed clinician social worker and the assistant principal in Plymouth. We have Jenny, who teaches at Plymouth County Suicide Prevention. We have Andy and Courtney with CCBC, which is the Community Counseling of Bristol County. They work primarily in crisis prevention and intervention. We have Carolyn here representing the Pupil Personnel Services here in Middleborough Public Schools. And we have Sergeant John Graham of Middleborough Police Department, who is our schools resource officer for the last 3 years here in Middleborough Public Schools. Before I turn it over to Josh and Kevin, I have to start with a reminder. This is a public meeting and it's being recorded, so please avoid using personal information and naming names. All right, Kevin and Josh, you're up.
Thanks, Shelley. I appreciate it. First of all, before we start, I just wanted to thank all the panelists that are also here tonight. I got to give a huge shout out to Shelley. Without her putting this all together, we wouldn't be here tonight. Just to echo some of the sentiments that she said, the goal is to start the conversation here, but not end it, about mental health and hopefully give some insight, normalize, highlight a couple of aspects of mental health and the current climate we're living in. Disclaimer, going back to the survey that was sent out, there are going to be some broad topics presented tonight. But again, if there are specific questions after you leave this, whether they be tonight, tomorrow, a week from now, I can make myself available to answer those. So let's jump in a little bit here. Next slide there, Sean. Thanks. So yes, mental health has been stigmatized for a long time. Again, our goal in putting this together is to start the conversation and put the subject of mental health out there in the open. Without me giving an example, for those of you watching at home, take 5 seconds and think of something that was highly stigmatized 50 years ago and now isn't stigmatized or more openly accepted. Once you thought of that, I ask, why is that? Because more and more people are talking about it, normalizing it, and putting it out in the open with more information that people can learn about it. Next slide. I said at the beginning to kind of look at the context in which we're currently living in. And I would hate to say that we have to talk about COVID-19. I'm tired of COVID as much as the next person, but I feel like given the current pandemic, we should use it as our lens to view a couple of the mental health topics for tonight. First, we all need to take a step back, breathe, and be present. And look at what we've been dealing with for the past year. There's no playbook of how to manage a pandemic or manage ourselves or our loved ones. Very few people have lived through a pandemic of this magnitude. We're all going through this together, one day at a time, and quite frankly, we're all just trying to survive. We as a whole need to take a breath, cut everyone a little bit of slack, show some grace as we're all just trying to manage ourselves, our families, and our loved ones. As a society, we have faced more adversity as a collective group than ever before, and it doesn't help that we live in an outcome-driven world. While we look forward to the outcome, or end, of the pandemic, we need to embrace the process and manage the middle. I ask the question, how has COVID-19 impacted all of us? Next slide. Loss. We have all lost something. Time, income, jobs, relationships, life. And we're all grieving that loss as a collective group. We all grieve differently, and that's okay. Next slide. Here are the 7 stages of grief: shock, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, testing, and acceptance. Take a quick minute and read what's written next to them. I would think that for everyone, reading this should help with the feelings that we've all been experiencing at one point or another over the last year. What's important here is to understand that there's no timetable for each stage, nor is the progression of the stages linear, meaning you don't go from shock to denial to anger to bargaining and so on and so forth. For example, the next slide I'm going to show is one of my favorite illustrations of the stages of grief, and in some ways, how I personally have felt through this pandemic. Next slide. As you can see, these emotions fluctuate on a daily basis. For me, I try my best to manage those using the skills I have acquired. If you put this into context of school-age students, some with a previous diagnosis, one can only imagine the flurry of emotions they feel as new information has been constantly introduced and expectations changed. They have yet to acquire the skills to help manage their emotions and therefore need assistance doing so. Next slide, John. Tying our theme of loss and grief in the current climate we are managing together, I know I felt at times like I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. This feeling can be described as anticipatory grief. Students may call it worry, which ultimately turns into heightened anxiety. These two statements on the slide are here to illustrate what we all, on some level, knowingly or unknowingly, have had this added layer of emotions. You are the expert on your loved ones. You'll be able to identify changes that need addressing. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Kevin. He's going to dig a little bit deeper into anxiety and depression, how technology and social media play a key role, as that was one of the common themes and results yielded from the survey.
Thanks, Josh. Next slide. So I'm just going to go quickly onto the signs of anxiety and depression. I think over the last year, we've all had feelings of dread, panic, or impending doom with the uncertainty of COVID-19, what was happening with school or childcare, and then with our students or young ones with their social, skills or social relationships that they had. They were missing out on sports or activities. So I know at the beginning of the pandemic, I felt this way based on the information that I was taking in, and I don't think, a lot of the answers have been answered. We're still having a lot of questions to this time right now. So I think the anxiety that we feel is real. It's something that we're constantly trying to deal with, those racing thoughts or overthinking, trying to control things that we cannot control. So this has been a huge issue with the community, with students. So the problems with sleep, studies have shown that since the start of the pandemic as a whole, people have been reporting issues with sleep. Some fears such as social anxiety or phobias may be triggered by specific situations, objects, or settings. Other types of anxiety, such as generalized anxiety disorder or panic disorder, can lead to symptoms that occur with greater frequency. So understanding the difference between issues that we're having because of circumstances versus issues that are internal is something that we try to deal with daily, particularly in a school setting, trying to make sure that the students understand the difference of something that's internal and biochemical versus something that is something normal for all of us, public speaking or taking a big test. And those are different that we try to work on getting to normalize those behaviors. Next slide, please. So we may not have lost interest in the things we enjoy, but instead they have been taken away or shut down this year, like we talked about a little bit with some of the activities, going to the gym, going to the movies, going out to eat. These are situations that are beyond our control, but still cause some level of depression. We're unable to do the things that we want to do, so our mood may be affected. We may lose interest or enjoyment in the activities that we used to enjoy. There's endogenous depression, which is within, feelings of sadness or worthlessness, guilt, and the inability to enjoy normal pleasurable activities. You may notice things in your appetite, sleep patterns, or energy levels. And this is, again, something biochemical that we may be dealing with major depression, or we may be dealing with different things that we have to learn how to cope with on a daily basis. The other one, we have exogenous, which is something that we've all experienced this year, which is something that we cannot control, something external, something that may happen in somebody's life, a death in the family, or a loss of a job, or a pandemic hitting. And those things are normal feelings that we all kind of have to get used to, or kind of work with to try to cope with ourselves. With both of these, anxiety and depression, I want to convey that they are normal and that they are part of life. Just like sadness or anger, there's something that we as humans are designed to feel, and we need to be able to acknowledge that and work together with professionals or friends or loved ones to try to be able to handle those on a consistent basis. The idea, and I tell my students all the time, this will either define you or you will learn to control it. And so those are the daily things that we try to work on to try to get them to understand that it's okay to have these feelings, it's okay to be upset, but how we put that in, how we deal with that on a daily basis is what's going to define us and how we move forward. And then the next big thing, next slide, Sean. The next big thing that I've noticed a huge increase in, particularly working in a school setting, has been the increase in technology and social media amongst our loved ones. So I've been in, so right now I work in a middle school, but I came from a high school setting. So I've kind of had a vast variety of age that I've worked with over the last 10 years. But the increase in social media, so we had a project that was due for our 8th grade class this past month, and they had to identify an issue that they felt that was concerning for them. And almost every class chose rising mental health concerns among adolescents. And every single one of them kind of thought it was connected to COVID, and they're just noticing now what the impact of that was. But as I went into the classrooms and I started talking to the kids, a lot of the issues that they were bringing up was social media, was whether it was cyberbullying, whether it was just constantly being connected to information. That inability to turn that off was something that they all kind of connected with. So I did a little, it says right here that 40% of adolescent girls and 20% report using social media for over 3 hours or more a day. But I was in probably about 10 classrooms over the last couple of weeks, and I had the students kind of pull out their phone and swipe over and tell me how long they've spent on average daily on their phone. And every single one of them, it was 8, 9, 10 hours. So if they're awake for 15 to 15 hours, some of these kids, they're on the phone for 10 hours a day, and that's including. So that increase in connectivity to the technology, but they're decreased the connectivity to the personal relationships. And I think that's had a huge impact on our young individuals. So, definitely something to keep in mind on, and trying to make sure that we're monitoring their use, trying to provide them with alternatives to sitting on their phone, and, making sure that they're making good positive decisions with that technology. So I'm going to kick it back to Josh, who's going to talk a little bit about what to do with our thoughts and feelings and self-care.
Thanks, Kev. So exactly that. What do we do with all these thoughts and feelings? Talk to somebody. Talk to anybody. Start with anybody. Get your feelings out in the open. Sharing feelings is great. I tend to be an oversharer at times with people, but for me, that's how I deal with some of the things that are going on in my life. Just letting somebody else know how you're feeling could be all you need. Or it's just the start of realizing you need to take it a step further. If you want something more formal in terms of a therapist, there'll be people that will discuss that later. And then self-care. Sean, can you switch the slide right now? I'm going to kind of stick with my notes though. So here's 2 slides with a bunch of self-care ideas that sometimes we think about, sometimes we don't. And I'm a firm believer that self-care should be applied universally, meaning whether you have identified areas where self-care needs to happen in order for you to manage your day-to-day, or even if you're the highest functioning adult, self-care is something that still should be practiced. Next slide, Sean. Sometimes self-care takes coordination depending on your circumstances. You may need help from others in order to carve out a little time for yourself, but that shouldn't discourage you from trying to work towards that. I know when we oftentimes look at ourselves, we tend to put others first, or our kids or our family first. There are times, though, we need to kind of ask others for help, whether it be to kind of step in for an hour or have your kids go to a neighbor or a family member's house where you could take that half hour, that hour to do one of these things that you saw in the last two slides. I think that's important for everybody to have that individual time if possible. Next slide, Sean. Okay, so some next steps when it becomes too much. I know you're probably going to say, Josh, this is great. We're going to have self-care. We're going to, we're going to go get a manicure, we're going to get a pedicure, we're going to sit, we're going to have a cup of coffee. However, we all know that sometimes that's not the case. What happens when the thoughts become too much, or when, there's a potential of acting out, or you have a loved one who does act out? What do I do then? What are those next steps? If you want to bring kind of everybody back in, we can get the rest of our panel here and their expertise, and we can talk, with Andy, Courtney, Jenny, and Sgt Graham, and they can share, their thoughts on, what they can bring to the table in their areas, in their field, in order to help kind of navigate when it does kind of elevate to that next level. So I don't know if we want to kick it over to Courtney and Andy, who are from CCBC and Crisis, and kind of have them go through the lay of the land of what a crisis eval might look like, or when the need is to call for one.
All right, hello everyone. My name's Courtney. I'm representing CCBC, which is the local community crisis team for the Middleborough and larger surrounding towns and areas. We've referred to as a few different things, right? So folks sometimes call us emergency services. They sometimes call us the local crisis team. They sometimes call us mobile crisis. First and foremost, we're not scary. We're not coming to take anyone away. Really, we are here as a resource to any member of the local community, or to any family member who has a loved one in the local community. We are 24/7. There are, direct landlines and toll-free numbers in order to call and reach us. And more importantly, there is a crisis team for every town across the state of Massachusetts. So if you're not specific to this area, or if down the line you're in a different area, you can Google emergency services programs for the state of Massachusetts, and a compiled list will come up with all the up-to-date information. We offer an awful lot of different services, and first and foremost, we're there to listen, and we're there to try and help. We are sometimes insurance-based, depending on how far we're going to take the services, but folks call us anonymously looking for information, or having worked with us in the past looking for some guidance. We try to collect as much information as we can over the phone. So oftentimes folks will ask me, what should I expect if I'm going to reach out to you? And I would say, you're going to get a friendly voice on the other end of the phone. Like I said, 24/7, day or night, holidays included. We're always there. And really, we're going to ask, who you're calling about or what you're calling about, but it's all up to you as far as what information you want to share. And my recommendation is, the more you share, the easier it is for us to direct you. So whether you're a professional in the field, the person themselves looking for help, or you're calling on behalf of a loved one, tell us as much as you're comfortable with, and we will ask questions from there. At any point in time, you can say that you're not comfortable answering that question, or you prefer not to answer that question, and that's fine. We'll continue on from there. It might just be connecting to resources, and it might be a more formal evaluation. And again, big scary words here. An evaluation is simply a one-on-one meeting with a clinician. And if it's a youth, someone who is 20 years old or younger, then it might also involve a family partner, someone who has raised someone in their family or supported someone in their family through the mental health system, the local juvenile system, has worked with the Department of Children and Families, or with school systems such as getting their youth on an IEP or a 504 for additional supports. Someone that's been there, done that, and can give their own perspective and guidance to you from a very non-clinical perspective. And sometimes we also have peer support specialists, folks themselves who have struggled in the past, but they're currently in a space of wellness and they're able to offer, sort of guidance from their past experiences. That's all an evaluation is. We're going to ask some questions to better understand the situation and to better understand the individual or the family. But it's not meant to be scary. It's meant to be supportive. Again, the more we know, the better we are able to guide. As I mentioned, we are insurance-based sometimes when we get into the deeper services. So predominantly, if you don't have any insurance at all, or if you have Mass Health, this is a service that's available to you. We do work actively to contract with the various commercial carriers to try to provide more services to our local community as the need arises. But if you don't have, quote unquote, the right insurance, you can always call us and ask, what should I do in this situation? Where do I go next? Or do you even have a direct contact? Is there a name and number that you know of that I can call? Even though we don't work with every single insurance, we are well networked in the community. So we do know a lot of the local providers, and we do have a lot of those names and numbers where you don't have to continue to make cold calls. Once we hear a little bit about what you're looking for, we can make that warm handoff for you so that you have that next step and you know where you're going to get the help that you're looking for. And that's sort of a brief overview. Again, what to expect when calling us. It's a friendly voice. That's where it starts. There will be some questions. We do ask for that identifying information. But again, as a reminder, you can always say that you don't feel comfortable answering that question or you'd prefer not to go into detail. And we'll continue to take it from there. And well, Andy has a few sort of specific scenarios because again, it's not just folks themselves that call us for help, but it's also other providers in the community. It's family members near and far. So she has some more specific examples to share with you to help bring it to life.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Courtney. That was a great overview of what crisis is. So my name is Andy Peters-Kurtz. I'm the site director of the Taunton Attleboro crisis team, also through CCBC. So as Courtney mentioned, we do cover the Middleborough and some surrounding areas. So people can call us 24/7, as Courtney mentioned. And some scenarios would include a child struggling in school and how best we could help them with their mental health. I actually had a client's mom call today because the client was struggling in returning from in-home school to hybrid learning. So I know that is very challenging. And so, we're doing an assessment on the family and seeing how best we could help them. We also have parents who call for adult children who may be concerned about their substance use. And a lot of adult children may not want the help. So we could offer different services, different resources. And we're also voluntary. So we would never mandate an evaluation. We're here to help you. As Courtney mentioned, we are not scary. We definitely just want to help you, your family, the community, the schools, any way that we can. So we assess for levels of care. That's one of the things that we do. And we can go as low as outpatient therapy or to the highest level of care, which, does sound a little bit scary, where it's called inpatient psychiatric treatment. Now, that is an extreme case where, somebody or if you're feeling like you want to hurt yourself or somebody else, that's where we would require inpatient psychiatric treatment. At our Norton site, we do have a crisis stabilization unit where if you're just feeling upset, if you're feeling depressed, anxious, and you're looking for medication, you would be assessed by our team and we would make a referral for a crisis unit where you stay for about 3 to 5 days. It's a 24-hour supervised supportive program. You would participate in groups and you could get a medication evaluation. Then there's also a day program. So if you think that you're just struggling, but you don't really need to go out of home, you just need someone to talk to and it's more intense, there's various programs out there called partial hospitalization programs. Again, these names are pretty scary, but I'm here to explain how they can help you. So the partial program is a day program. It's up to 14 days. Again, a quick way to engage in mental health treatment. You would participate in counseling in groups, and you could also meet with a psychiatrist. And then, of course, we could always help you just find an outpatient therapist or somebody to talk to, and get you maybe a referral for medication if you're struggling with anxiety, depression, anything like that. So again, as Courtney mentioned, we are 24 hours, 24 hours a day, holidays, weekends, anytime you need us, you guys could give us a call, and we would always be there to help you and also provide you with any resources that you may need.
So again, there is no issue too big or too small. Whatever your struggle is a struggle to us, and we're there to help. Some are very small, again, just looking for resources, just looking to get pointed in the right direction. Others are more nerve-wracking or more intense in the time. Oftentimes folks will ask us, what am I supposed to do, or what do you suggest that I do if someone is going to hurt themselves, or I really think that someone is going to hurt themselves. And first and foremost, I think it's bringing it to the attention of the right person, right? So if you're an adult and you're calling about a loved one, then that's how you start the conversation. You call and you say, I don't know what to do. My name's Courtney, and I'm calling because I have a good friend or I have a significant other, and I think they might genuinely actually hurt themselves. When it's not right there in the moment, when a person doesn't have something, say, in their hands, a knife or scissors or something where you feel like in the moment they're going to hurt themselves right in front of you, then we're a great first phone call, because we're gonna walk you through that. We're gonna ask some more specifying questions. We're gonna gather some more information. We're gonna go through options with you. And certainly, if the person, the risk is there, the concern is there, but you're really afraid. Well, my good friend, dear Gary here, he's not open to help. He's not going to want to talk to you. He's not going to want to engage. Then we're going to reach out to our collaborative partners. We might place a call to the local police. We might ask for a community intervention trained police officer on staff. We want to do a wellness check. We might need to bring in this fella here, Gary, because he needs more help, and he might not want it right now, but we have some additional risks and concerns that we really need to try to figure out for this person to make sure that nothing happens to Gary. In the moment when a person is literally armed with something and it's right before your eyes, obviously your first call should be 911, as long as you're in Massachusetts. And if you're traveling, I highly encourage you, if you know that a person has a significant mental health history and you're concerned about what happens when you're away, research those types of things ahead of time. Where are you going? What's the emergency number in the hotel that you're staying at, or the local emergency number in that community? There's always help where you are. It's just helpful to look ahead of time when you know that there might be a need for it, so you're not scrambling in the moment. But if you're here in Massachusetts and there is someone that you're concerned about, you think they might really hurt themselves, but they're not in front of you, or texting you right now saying I'm about to hurt myself, then it's a great reason to call us. Again, we're going to ask you some clarifying information. We're going to try to guide through it, and then we're going to try to get the quickest and smoothest help for Gary as possible. We have some folks that in the moment, they were very mad that they came across our path. They did not want the help. They were not receptive. And then, a month and a half down the road, they're ringing the doorbell to our office and they're coming in and they're apologizing. They just want to say, I realized I wasn't really polite when I was there, but this is what you did for me. And thank you for stepping in and helping me when I didn't want to help myself. So always start that way. Always. A quick call whenever you need to. No problem is too big or too small. And even if, it's not exactly a mental health thing, we'll direct you to the resources that we do know about so that you can get your answers.
Thanks, Andy and Courtney. That was great. A lot of information, which I'm sure people are out there trying to digest, but a lot of great information. There's one thing I wanted to kind of maybe shift with, and something you said for the people out there, and maybe transition to Sgt Graham at this point, because you said, if somebody's in imminent danger, you may have to call 911, and that's going to initiate a police response. If you're dealing with something like that in the moment, there's going to be a lot going through your mind. And if you've never had to do it before, it's going to be a little bit of a shock when you call 911 and then, all of a sudden there are two cruisers, maybe a fire truck and an ambulance on your front lawn, looking to assist you in whatever you may need. So maybe Sergeant Graham, from his perspective, if you get to that point, that unfortunate point where that's the next step that you've deemed you have to take, just maybe he can share what that looks like from start to finish, so people kind of understand what your goal is, Sergeant Graham, when that call comes through, or any one of the officers in the Middleborough Police Department. You get that call for someone who's having a mental health crisis, what it looks like from your perspective.
Thanks, Josh. Good evening, everyone. I'm John Graham. I'm a sergeant with the Middleborough Police Department. I'm currently assigned as a school resource officer for the last 3 years, myself and Officer Scott Phillips. And thanks for having me here. I'm not sure I belong with all these experts, but I'll give it a shot. Basically what happens, what you can expect, if you get an immediate situation, you call 911. They're going to dispatch at least two cruisers. That's our policy. Probably a supervisor as well. Depending on what type of information we're getting, there may be an ambulance dispatched. And usually if the ambulance is dispatched, the fire department comes. But a lot of times if it's an active disturbance, the ambulance will have them stage down the street. And a lot of times we'll have them turn their lights off. We try to have our, we try to get there as quick as, the situation warrants, and obviously kill the lights and sirens before, because, we try to de-escalate what's already happening. And sometimes hearing lights and sirens in cars just doesn't help. Our first thing is always going to be the safety of everyone involved. We'll get there and just try to calm the scene down, de-escalate everything that's going on, and try to listen and ascertain, where we are, get the facts from both the calling party and the person who they're calling on, who is maybe acting out. And then we kind of, it could go a whole bunch of ways. Sometimes just our presence calms everything down. And we tend to take our lead from the calling party. If it's de-escalated to the point where they feel safe again, we'll give them some options. I know we hand out William James interface cards. That's a college that we hand out their cards, and they have all different types of counselors for whatever need you have going on. Sometimes we can convince the person to maybe go in an ambulance for a voluntary trip to the hospital. And then there are some times that, especially if it's a juvenile and the parents want them transported, then obviously the parents' desire wins out. And, yes, it's voluntary on the parents' part, but for the juvenile, it's involuntary. We do our best to make the best situation possible. The last thing we want to do is any type of physical confrontation. However, sometimes, depending on the circumstances, that may result. And then obviously we're going to use, the least amount of force as required to safely handle the problem or the incident. One option we also have is Section 12, which gives us limited powers for an emergency involuntary commitment. Basically, we need to show that the person's a danger to themselves, a danger to others, or incapable of protecting themselves. If we can meet one of those three criteria, then as a law enforcement official, we can go ahead and fill out what they call Section 12 paperwork, and we can involuntarily make them go to the hospital, where they could be held for up to 72 hours. That's kind of our limited toolbox when it comes to that. Usually we always try to go the voluntary route, and more often than not, once everyone calms down and they've had a chance to vent, we usually get to that option when they realize that, if I go voluntary, it's going to be a lot better than involuntary. But we really just do the best we can to just keep everyone safe. And, our training in mental health issues from when I started almost 25 years ago is so much better. I mean, basically, we went from zero. You know, you didn't really just get there, handle it, and you go to your next call. Where now, you know, we have extra training on it, and if it takes 2 hours, we'll take 2 hours. You know, it's not the old days of you got to get there, handle it, and let's go. So we've come a long way. We got a long way to go, obviously, but I do see us handling these things a lot better than the old days.
Thanks, John. I chuckled there, you know, talking about the training there for a minute, because Jenny from the Plymouth County Suicide Prevention did your training. So hopefully you paid attention in school and you passed the quiz there. But I'd like, Jenny, if you could, I think there's obviously, it's very polarizing right now, and I'll just throw there's a disclaimer, you know, the role of mental health in law enforcement, and what the appropriate response is given the set of circumstances that are presented to them. So, you know, along with, you know, what John said, Sgt Graham said, maybe you could share a little bit of a couple things about what type of training, because I'm guessing that you don't necessarily just train local police departments. I'm sure you go into many different organizations, and then also too, as you know, I don't like to use the word scary, but as emotional as the topic could be, maybe you could talk a little bit about, you know, if you feel comfortable, the difference between suicidality and self-harm, and the correlation between the two, because I think, you know, in schools, yes, we do see quite a bit of self-harm, but that doesn't necessarily always mean that it's going to go to that next level. So if you could maybe touch on those two things, I think that would be great to kind of share with the people that are watching.
Thanks. So as far as working with the police, we did just train the entire Middleborough police force in mental health first aid. And it's more to give them tools and warning signs about someone who might be experiencing a mental health crisis or situation. You are right. We go out into any community and train. We do a lot of trainings with the police, with the sheriffs, and the correction officers. We also work with different veteran groups, and we love to get into the school systems. We have several different trainings that we can offer, whether for the students and staff, but also we have trainings that we offer as a 3-part with students, staff, and parents. All of our trainings are free. They're no cost to any school system, any organization, any company. My funding does come through the Department of Public Health, and that's how I'm able to do it at no cost to the communities. When I look at, I guess, suicide ideation in the actual act of harming or a suicide attempt, every single one of us at one point in our life can have suicide ideation. And that's just a thought. Whether, you know, we just make a gesture or we say something, but it doesn't mean that we're going to actually attempt or commit the act. So ideation is totally different. When we talk about self-harming, that's another thing. Self-harming, what we call non-suicidal self-injury, that does not mean that someone's trying to attempt to take their life. A lot of times, people that we know that we've talked to that self-harm are more doing it as a release or to have some type of relief. Is it an attempt? Not usually. We take everything serious when we talk about suicide or suicidality, or suicide ideation as well. We will dig further, and we do also provide a lot of the resources that Sgt Graham and Courtney and Andy talked about. One of the big ones we do use is William James College. It's a program called Interface, and it's only offered in certain communities within Massachusetts, but it's a great vetting service. A lot of the schools use that. And we also give out other resources in the community. Courtney talked about all the referral lines. We probably have all the same referral lines they have. And you can just call and talk. If you think that someone is thinking of harming themselves, you can also call the suicide prevention line, even if you want to just talk to them. They also are finding that kids now, when we're talking about social media, kids like to text. We know that they will text, or Instagram and everything. The suicide prevention line also has a text number now that a lot of people don't know about. And that's what we're finding in these times right now, that the youth are using. They're texting. Those numbers have gone up, they've increased. But it's more of, asking the questions, reaching out for help. Don't be afraid. End that stigma that we all talk about. One of the things that we also, working with the police departments, we know that there's some police departments in the state of Massachusetts that has a licensed clinician that might go on a mental health call with the police department, and they sometimes will do an evaluation to determine, does this person really need to go to the emergency room, or do they just need some help? Can it wait till we call a prevention line or a referral service? The communities that do have that service have found it extremely helpful, and hopefully we will get more in the state of Massachusetts to start doing it.
Thanks, Jenny. I appreciate that. That summed it up really well. If everybody wants to kind of, you can, Sean, bring everybody back in if anybody has anything to add or questions. If not, just to touch on one thing you said, Jenny, I'm going to plug the Middleborough Public Schools right now. I think I'd be remiss if I didn't. But when you talk about that partnership with mental health clinicians and the Middleborough Police, I've been in Middleborough now for going on 10 years, and we've always had an SRO at the high school level and at the middle school level. And we have, unfortunately, we have come across, many mental health issues within the school day, whether they are confined to the school or outside of the school. And I would say that the partnership that we have in particular at Middleborough, I can use Sgt Graham right now, as we've worked together the past 3 years. We've been in some situations where, based on the relationship and the conversations that we have and the trainings that people have offered, including yourself, to both mental health clinicians and the police department, we're able to either hopefully de-escalate or, be able to get a read from one another as to, what our next step should be, whether it be reaching out, to get someone to do an eval or get mobile crisis involved, or is a situation where, we got to get the parent involved. So for the Middleborough Public Schools and those who are out watching it at home, I will kind of say, we have a really great working relationship with the Middleborough Police Department. Not only our SROs, but over the course of time, everybody on the department, a lot of them are alumni from the high school, so they kind of do have a pretty good working relationship too. So I just wanted to let everybody know that we're trying our best in terms of that. And as far as tonight goes, there's a ton of resources that people mentioned, and you may not have known that these things existed, but there are a lot of people that I'm looking at on the screen right now who get up every day and are working towards keeping people, number one, safe and getting them whatever mental health assistance they may need. And I think everybody hit the nail on the head, like, to normalize it and to put it out there and talk about it and have this discussion. Going back to my point that I made in probably my boring slideshow, 50 years ago, this wouldn't be happening, right? Oh, it wouldn't be happening like this, that's for sure. But there wouldn't be people sitting on a stage somewhere inviting people in to say, hey, let's talk about mental health. Because we all, on some level, are dealing with it, especially now. I didn't mean to completely put it in the COVID framework, but I think we have to right now, because I think it's touching a lot more people than, the normal, quote unquote, the normal world was, 18 months ago. So if anybody has anything to add, feel free. I'd like to invite back on stage virtually Shelly and Carolyn. Again, I got to give a shout out to Shelly. So grateful for putting this together. This is just the start. It totally is. Without Shelly, for me, kind of staying on me and guiding me and making sure I kind of got my act together, I wouldn't have been here tonight, and hopefully somewhat organized. So we do appreciate it. Do appreciate the work that you're doing constantly for the people of the Middleborough community. And I just got a message in the chat. John Graham has one thing to add. So I'm going to turn it to John Graham. This should be great.
I shocked you, I know. No, just to follow up with what Jeannie said, we are luckily one of those departments that has a clinician work with us. Her name's Katrina Lee, and she usually is in the station once a week, or she's in a surrounding town. And we do have the option to, if she's in the station in our town for the night, she will come out with us. We can call her and she'll respond from the other town if she's not tied up. And most of all our calls involving any type of mental illness or those types of incidents, we forward to her for follow-up. So I just wanted to let people know that we are lucky we do have that going on in our town.
Thanks so much. I wanted to thank everybody on the panel tonight for their expertise, for their time, and for the thoughtfulness of this presentation. As Josh Porter mentioned, 50 years ago, he was talking about the things that were stigmatizing. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say that 50 years ago, public schools weren't unpacking mental health or social emotional well-being at all. So tonight really does mark a first step in breaking down a barrier between, not just educators and families, but the marrying of education and mental health. Because without adequate mental health, without addressing those needs, there's no curriculum, there's no learning that can truly persist or flourish without meeting these needs. And I know that the Middleborough Public Schools community recognizes this, and we're so fortunate to partner with groups like CPAC, among other parent groups and community stakeholders that fully understand that. COVID's really brought that to the fore, but it's existed prior to COVID. We've heard probably quite a few things about COVID in this learned experience as we've gone on. One of the pieces that has stuck with me personally is the comparison to COVID, to ultimately putting us all in the same storm, but recognizing that we're all in our own boat and that every boat is different. And in a lot of ways, that's what unpacking mental health really is. It's that awareness that you're more than your struggle and that it doesn't define you. So I wanted to tie in one more piece, which is that, tonight's a heavy topic with a lot of different resources and, accounts that you heard here tonight. So it may not be on the tip of your thought process of what to do with it. And, the way Mr. Porter began and the way I think I'd like to remind everybody now is to reach out. You can reach out to any of the professionals here on this panel. You can also reach out to a myriad of professionals in the Middleborough public school system, ranging from school adjustment counselors to school psychologists to administrators, school nurses, guidance counselors. There's a whole host of people in every single building waiting to assist you at a time of need. And while educators are in the business of educating, it's so much beyond simple topics and curricular-based materials. It really is a holistic approach. And that's something that the Middleborough Public Schools has known for well over a decade. And hopefully tonight marks the start of many more events like this to come. So before I turn to Shelley, I want to leave you with one more thought, because topics like this are heavy. And I repeatedly in my line of work here in the district, and even, personally, consistently hear people express to me the way they feel that they are failing in different aspects, with education or their children or even personally. And I like to remind everybody, because I've heard it said so many times, that nobody is failing. You are surviving a pandemic. So I thank all of you tonight. Tonight's event is going to be recorded in hopes of making this accessible to everybody, no matter what your personal or work schedule is. I would invite anybody to look us up, look this website up. We'll be tweeting it out, putting it up on our website as well. And with that, I'll turn it back to Shelley Berard to close us out for the night.
Well, thank you everyone for being here. I don't have a lot to say because I'm not an expert. It was just me trying to facilitate a great group of people to come and talk. If there's anything that I can do to help anyone, I have a handful of co-chairs too. You can reach out to us at info.mcpac.org and we can get you connected with any of the resources, the people that are here tonight. Again, like Carolyn said, there's a ton of school resources as well. I think the thing that all of us would want to stress is that you're not alone. You know, there's a lot of people out there, and these people that are here tonight are working tirelessly, a lot of them with private practices that they're not participating in tonight to be here for us. So please know you're not alone, and there are people and resources that are available to help take care of each other. Good night.